but I'm gonna try to let them sleep as long as possible. What could be really cool is if you do have a close finish. There's gonna be some emotional moments on this section of trail because this is kind of the closure. This is the end. We're down to the final stretch. This is the last day of the Iditarod, the last kind of section, if you will. You know, when I think of the whole Iditarod, I don't think of necessarily just a 1,000-mile race or this year a little bit shorter. I think of the entire process, developing this team over the course of the year, reaching back a little bit farther and developing these dogs over their lifetime. You know, there's gonna be dogs in my team from 3 to 8 years old. That's a long time that we've been building each individual and working with them and bonding with them to now have this team. And ostensibly, the Iditarod is the purpose for that. It gives us a sense of purpose. It gives us a direction. It gives us a goal. But the real purpose, I think, is spending your life with animals, building a team, and feeling like you have a sense of purpose. I think every year when I get to this final stretch of this race, the last day, the last 100 miles, that's invariably what ends up in my mind. As you near the end, I think you look back over your shoulder, all the way back to not only the lifetime of the dogs in my teams, but their parents and their grandparents who taught me how to mush. Going all the way back to when I was first learning how to be a dog musher and learning about this and how far I've come in that process. So I always feel like the final miles of the Iditarod are as much about reflection as closing out the deal. This year, that last stretch is going to be taking place between Rainy Pass to Finger Lake to Skwenta, and then the final shot from Skwenta into Willow and the finish. We have a mandatory 8-hour break at Skwenta, which would typically be our mandatory 8 in White Mountain on a normal year. So when we leave Rainy Pass, which will, depending on how the trail plays out, will likely be somewhere near, you know, midnight or maybe in the wee hours of the morning. We'll take off from Rainy Pass, and I do think that's going to be a very common stopping place because it breaks up the last little bit of the race quite nicely. From there, it's going to be about a 29-mile run back over to Finger Lake, back down to Happy River, and then climbing up the Happy River steps to Finger Lake. And something that I think every musher that's run the Iditarod, at least, you know, maybe for the few exceptions where the race has run from Fairbanks, has gone down the Happy River steps and then gone up the other side of that ravine and probably thanked their lucky stars that we don't have to go down that one. Well, this year, since we're going the opposite direction back over that trail, we do have to go down that kind of very steep trail getting down to Happy River. We may find that that is more noteworthy than the steps themselves, going either down them or back up them. That being said, at this point in the race, I think everybody's going to be calmed down enough. The dogs and the mushers are going to be kind of in sync, and I don't think that that section will be quite as scary as it would be, for example, if you hit it on the first or second day of the Iditarod. So I'm hoping that we're calmed down a little bit because it is going to be a hectic ride going down. I mean, it doesn't even have a name because we've always gone up it, and going up it's not that difficult. Going down it is going to be something you remember, that's for sure. Once we get to Finger Lake, I don't think you're going to see too many people stopping and camping in Finger Lake. If they do stop in Finger Lake, it'll be just long enough to give them that extra bump, the fuel they need to make it onto Skwenta and their mandatory 8. Generally speaking, I feel like my dog teams, when we reach that last mandatory 8, typically in White Mountain, this year in Skwenta, I think the main priority for the dogs is getting them a good nap, getting a good sleep, a good long sleep. I will feed them quickly upon arrival, get a good big meal in them so they can curl up and sleep comfortably and have a full belly and be, you know, kind of getting the energy they need from that meal while sleeping. But I'm going to try to let them sleep as long as possible, wake them up maybe an hour before it's time to go, give them a small kind of wake up snack. Mostly I'm focusing on getting them a nice long sleep there. And then when we pull the hook out of Skwenta, we've got that final run going back over to Willow, Deshka Landing specifically. You know, this is going to be kind of an interesting one because here we have a shorter run than we typically have from White Mountain to the finish. It's only going to be 61 or 62 miles. And depending on the time of day that we come through here, especially with the COVID times that we're facing right now, I think we're going to see a lot of people out on the river instead of going to the finish line to watch the mushers cross the finish, which they're kind of discouraging having that crowd there. I think people are going to take their snow machines out and watch those final miles and have the tailgating parties just like they did at the beginning of the race. So I think this could be really interesting watching are seeing what it's going to be like. It could be a 60-mile long parade all the way to the finish line. And on one hand, that'll be kind of cool. It'll be neat to have people interacting with the dog teams and seeing these mushers at the end of a race, not just at the beginning. On the other hand, as a musher, when it's all you can do to keep focused on the dogs and stay awake, and now you got to wave and say hi, it can be a little bit distracting, I suppose, as well. What could be really cool is if you do have a close finish. Two teams maybe nose to tail or in close proximity to one another doing that final push to the finish. This is going to be a place that spectators can actually be out there watching mushers racing for all the marbles right here, heading towards the finish lines. I'm excited about this race back on the kind of on the road system. Unfortunately, you know, we don't get to go to the villages up the Yukon River and along the Bering Sea coast that have played host to the Iditarod year after year after year. So I feel bad for them, but there's always a silver lining. And I guess in this case, it's the people back here in road system Alaska may get to see the finish of this race or see the race in a way they never have before. So that'll be quite exciting. But for the musher, I think as you go through that stretch, you will have some distractions with people and spectators and the bonfires out there. But despite all that, I think your attention is going to be on the same place. You're going to be looking at this dog team, no matter where you finish. Just the fact that you covered this trail, and if you make it back to this point, there's going to be some emotional moments on this section of trail because this is kind of the closure. This is the end, the final miles, the last minutes and hours you'll get to spend with this unique, specific dog team. Each team is different. The individuals change year over year. You might have the same dog in there, but you know, take Gamble for example, one of my old timers here, very likely to be on my race team. You know, he is a different dog now than he was when he was a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so while it's still Gamble, it's still him, he's still on the team, he brings a different element to the team. Each team is unique. So again, I feel like this final stretch is about enjoying that team and enjoying this group that you just accomplished an amazing thing with and appreciating those dogs and remembering, you know, how far they've traveled both literally on this race and kind of metaphorically in their own kind of development as a sled dog. Once you cross the finish line, this kind of magical thing that is the Iditarod seems like it's broken. Not broken, just over. It ends. And that bond that you have, that so insane connection with each dog, with every aspect of this team where if a dog moves over here, you sense it more than see it or hear it. That is over once we come back to civilization, to population. Of course, now we have all the humans that want to interact with you and talk to you, and it's fun to be back with our handlers and helpers, kind of got us onto the race and helped us throughout the entire season, and it's great to be back with them. But I'm just thinking that those final miles are really where I kind of dwell on and really absorb every last drop of this unique space and time, this unique group of individuals, this team, and kind of reflecting on what they've done so far. Of course, once you cross the finish line, all mayhem kind of breaks loose, and you know, the focus is everywhere, it seems, but on the dogs. I guess the dogs, they're ready for a nap, they curl up and go to sleep, and now there's humans that need your attention or want your attention, and so it changes a little bit, and I enjoy all aspects, but it is just good to identify all the aspects. So I have won the Iditarod a few times. I've been fortunate enough to experience it a few different ways and a few different times. Once, you know, was the first time. I had enough of a lead that I could really absorb it and kind of think about, holy cow, we actually did it. These dogs and I, we actually accomplished this goal that seemed unattainable. And if we have a new champion this year, I know that that's the feeling they will be experiencing, this almost this disbelief that this could actually happen to them, that they are actually capable of winning the Iditarod. I know that's what I felt. Other years, I won the Iditarod by 2 minutes and 22 seconds. And when I crossed the finish line, I didn't even know I had won it. That's an entirely different experience in those final miles where I'm racing for all I'm worth. And so those are the different kind of feelings I've had when winning the race. But anytime you finish it, again, it's just this overwhelming sense of pride. That's really the takeaway. You're just so dang proud of this team and these dogs and what they can do and how they've all evolved into themselves. And that's an amazing feeling. So regardless of whether you're rooting for a team that finishes first or last, or it doesn't really matter. When they've reached the finish line, they've accomplished something. To me, when I think about the end of the Iditarod and the final stretch, there's the strategy in the race, but the closer you get to the finish, the more it becomes reflective, I suppose. Once you cross over that finish line, after the race is over, perhaps you go inside a building, or in Nome, it would be a host family house, or here, I guess I'll come back to my own house, and you sit down, and for the first time in 8 or 9, 10, 12 possibly, days, there is nothing you have to do right now. This is the first time that you can actually just relax. It is the strangest feeling, because even on the Iditarod, when you have an hour to sleep, you have to sleep. There is pressure. There is this feeling that I have got to fall asleep immediately, because if I don't get 59 minutes of sleep out of this 1 hour, I'm not going to be able to stay awake tomorrow. It's going to be another 20 hours till I get an opportunity to sleep even a second. So it really is that feeling of, I don't have anything I have to do right now. There is no dog that relies on me this one instant, and it's really relaxing. And then you fall asleep, and about 16 hours later, you'll wake up stiff as a board because you haven't moved in 16 hours. And it's hard to believe, like, did that really just happen? Of course, if you win it or you have a great finish, there's that sense of almost euphoria. The whole experience, good, bad, ugly, no matter what you thought would happen or however you perceive it, the whole thing will be an experience. You can't decide if it's going to be a great experience, an okay experience, or a terrible experience, but it is an experience. So I guess that's the whole thing, is you wake up and you think, did that really just happen? And even though it may have only been 8 or 9 days ago when you started this race, it will feel like a lifetime ago. It'll feel like, thousands of days have passed since you left the starting line, mostly because I think we pack in so much into that 8 days. That's kind of the final stretch of the Iditarod, the final day. At least that's how I have experienced it. I'm sure everybody might, I suppose most are different on some degree, but I'm sure some commonality remains. That is the Iditarod.